What's up? Welcome to the Existential Stoic podcast. Today we're going to look at some thought-provoking philosophical questions and we're going to give you some answers. Hopefully, you'll find them enlightening or helpful. I'm Danny, who will be Randy. What's up, Randy?
Yo, Danny.
So we got a list. You want to just each go through them? We'll kind of look at some of the questions we think are the most interesting and go from
Yeah,
there.
let's rock out some of these questions. I mean, I was just looking at the list and there are a lot of interesting questions in there. So maybe we can spark some philosophical debate and see what's going on.
Yeah, and it's always I like doing this because it's always good to look at like fun questions like this. Just think it's just a good exercise in critical thinking and like just in thinking about things you don't really think about.
Because they're not questions that people generally ask you.
No, no, that's true. That is
Mhm.
true. Yeah, nobody usually asks you things like that or like actually deep
The
questions. It's
only
like, what's the
questions
weather
that
like?
anybody ever asks me is, have you seen what's the news? Have you seen what the news is? And it's like, I don't care. But
Have
yeah,
you seen them talk about what horrible things are happening? Good.
yeah, I don't care.
Oh, by the way, on that note, I meant to tell you this. This is sort of related. Who cares? We're gonna digress immediately. It's fine. No, what's funny? Everybody thinks like because how the news always portrays everything so negatively, and everybody thinks like this is the bloodiest time to be alive. People are the worst. And somebody mentions that I never thought about this way. But when you look back in time and you look at the numbers relative to population, dude, the past was way more violent and horrible. Murder rates were crazy high in the Middle Ages. If you go back to like Genghis Khan, they killed like 10% of the actual Earth's population. Like
Yeah.
nobody's done that in present wars, not even in like World War One or two. So
Hmm.
it's like, and that's just what like two examples. If you look back, like we are doing so much better than ever, and there's way more people than ever,
That's
which
a
is
good
kind of
point.
amazing.
Yeah, I've heard
Yeah.
it. Some guy, whenever he was getting pretty pessimistic about the future, he would just open up any history book and read it for an hour and then be like, you know what? Times are pretty good.
Yeah. Well, it's funny too. That's the other thing because they even said like people say now like, oh, homelessness and like hunger are worse than ever, and actually they're better than ever, especially when you look at it relative. But people we don't look at it relative to numbers. We say,
What?
oh, there's this many, but there's also way more people now. There's almost 9 billion people. There
Yeah,
was like a couple hundred million back in the past, if that.
there's a really good book, Factfulness, where he talks about the actual facts about what's going on in the world. And yeah, the world is getting better.
Yeah, and that's the
Doesn't
problem with the
feel
news. They
doesn't
never give
feel
you
like
that.
it though if you watch any social media
Yeah.
news, anything like that.
Well, that's the thing, right? Because we are, well, we don't have to get into all this, but yeah, we're trained to kind of like evolutionarily, right? That
Uh-huh.
disaster stuff makes us more, engages us more. So
Now shall
anyway,
we
let's look at some,
regress? We already
yes, let's
regress. Let's
we
regress.
digress. Let's regress back to where we were. Do
All
you want to
right.
start with the questions? You want to
Yeah,
pick the first
sure.
one?
Yo,
All right.
why does suffering happen? Why is there suffering?
That is a good freaking question.
Because it sucks. I mean,
It
if I
does suck.
designed the world, there would be no suffering, but I didn't design it.
Yeah. But I think okay, so I think there obviously I think we can point to like from a scientific standpoint, there's obviously evolutionary reasons for suffering, right? And like I'm talking about broadly speaking. So like any kind of pain or anything. Like if I touch a hot thing, I'm not going to do that again in the future. I'll check how hot it is before I touch it. So there is that side of it. I think that like
So you're not
I'm sure
differentiating pain and suffering.
not I was trying to be more I think our concept of suffering actually I really do think it's tied to our association with pain in general.
Uh-huh.
And so I think there is that evolutionary connection. But you're right, we
Mm.
do suffer more broadly, like mental stress, depression, suffering in those senses. We suffer in the sense of where we fit in the community, all of that. So like I think also though, I really like Nietzsche's response to suffering that it's a matter of interpretation, that we interpret suffering as bad, and then we think we have to avoid it or fight it or get rid of it at all costs. But we can interpret suffering also as good, where suffering is just an opportunity to overcome ourselves. It's an opportunity to outdo ourselves, to be pushed, to find new solutions, to think differently, to find new skill sets, to figure out how to do things, to maybe even reinvent ourselves. It's like, I mean, a lot of people, we've been through this, I'm sure a lot of people have, where like, realizing like you chose a career that you don't like anymore, or for whatever reason, it's no longer working for you. That sucks. And it's hard. And making the transition is really difficult. But if you listen to that suffering and then you actually don't just like try to avoid it, you actually face it, your life can be a lot better too if you overcome it. So I think I like Nietzsche's interpretation where suffering is a means of self-overcoming. And if we look at it that way, it's actually a positive thing, not a negative thing.
Mm. Yeah, it could also be a way to recognize your shared humanity. So this is something that
Yeah.
I've been so like one of my practices is I try and recognize when I'm suffering because like I'll go days where I'm just in a bad mood because I'm not recognizing that I'm suffering. Once I recognize it, then eventually it passes. But like uh but the crazy thing is so like step one, recognize that I'm suffering. Step two, recognize in life there's suffering. You know, I suffer, other people suffer. And then step three, how can I be kind to myself in the face of this suffering? But it's also
I
like,
like,
yeah, but
okay.
it's also like right now I'm suffering. This sucks. But you know what? Other people suffer too. Oh my goodness, could I have some compassion for them when they're suffering? Like, like now when since I've experienced a toothache, when somebody else has a toothache, I can be compassionate. I can be like, "Oh man, that must be everything that's hogging your attention right now. No wonder you're acting like a moron because your tooth hurts." And it's like
Yeah.
I can have some compassion in this sense. So I think that's one part of it. I also think my first answer to that question, why is there suffering or why does suffering happen? Because we're rational. I mean,
Yeah.
if we weren't, there would be no suffering. It would just be pain. There would be pain, and then there would be no pain. But then there's like suffering, like pain. Oh, woe is me. Why am I suffering? I shouldn't have to suffer. Yeah, that stuff.
Well, that's the other side is we're meaning makers, right? And so every time something happens, we look for these meanings. So we also, our suffering is also a lot of that tied to the why factor. Why me? Why is this happening? Why does, like you said, why does suffering exist? Even that question itself is loaded, right? Like, it's kind of like, yeah. Anyway, I like what you said too, that like that idea of a shared humanity and recognizing it through it is a really good idea because one, like we're so hard on ourselves and just recognizing that we suffer just like everybody else is you can be compassionate to yourself. But you can also extend that compassion outward, and that's a really good point too. Like it doesn't mean I haven't had gone through the same experience, but like I know what I feel like when, say, I'm anxious or depressed or something. And so I can extend that to other people if they're feeling sad or something's wrong or whatever, whether it's the same experience or not, it doesn't matter.
Mhm.
So that's a good one. I like that. All right. So my first question, I actually kind of like this is actually close to that one, but I like it. What makes human life so valuable? And again, another loaded question kind of, but
What makes human life so bad? Yeah, that that is us humans discussing this. That's
yeah,
why.
yeah, that's what's crazy.
That's literally the only thing that makes human life so valuable is that we're the ones discussing it. Because I doubt dolphins sit around underwater and be like, why is human life so valuable?
It's funny. Nietzsche says something like, we can't evaluate life like whether it's good or bad. He's like, because one, we're an interested party, and when we're not here, we can't say anything about it for other reasons.
Right.
You know?
Exactly. Yeah, what do you
But
have to say about that question?
well, the reason why I chose this question is because I just thought it was very funny they worded it. But the way I guess I take, if I'm being charitable, is like, why do we think human life is so valuable? Maybe above other life,
Oh.
maybe. And I think if we look at it that way.
Or maybe along the lines of like, why don't we just go around murdering people? Like,
Yeah,
why is
exactly,
human
right?
life
Like why
valuable?
or why do we think we should even be concerned with helping others, right? Stuff like that. And I think part of that too is like I always like there is this kind of response where like, and this goes back to the idea of like humanity. Like, would I want to live in a world that treated people like this? Or would I want to be a part of a situation where people are treated like X? Or people like, even if it helps you, people like me, like where I was treated like this, right? So I think like that's a helpful solution where like it's valuable because we see ourselves in everything in the world. We find meaning in everything. And we live in the world. So whatever happens in the world, in some sense, it's a part of our environment. Would I want to live in a world like that? Do I want to live in a world where people are treated like trash or where people are treated, like some of them are treated like they can be killed and it doesn't matter? Like, no, I don't want to live in a world like that. And so that gives us value because of our shared humanity.
Mm. Yeah, I like that as well. And the fact that like I try and consider myself like a member of this bigger thing. And so like as being a member, I have to do my part in it. And by giving myself value and giving other people value, it'll make the whole thing more valuable and it'll come back and make me more valuable.
Well, yeah, it's only as valuable as we make it, right? Like it's, you don't litter in your community because it's community wants to be nice, right? But if you do, you're like kind of setting the value. You set the bar, right?
Bingo.
Boom.
Okay, so next question. Can happiness be measured or quantified like money and power?
Can happiness be measured or okay, I found it. Measured or quantified like money or power? That's actually kind of an interesting question, right? Because this is, I think,
You're like,
well, it
oh,
is.
I'm an 89 in happiness. What are you?
Well, no, I actually like think this is interesting because we always think of it as like having some sort of metrics, right? We're like, if I do this,
Well,
then I'll be
clearly,
happy.
the
If I
more
get
money
that,
you
then I'll,
have,
yeah,
the
yeah,
more
the more.
cars, the more sexual partners, the more this, the that, all that stuff.
Well, we've talked about this in the past with where we talked about like I think the problem with our conception of success and stuff. And I think we do. We have this like skewed sense of like what makes life happy and all. And I think, I don't think it can actually be um quantified in that way. I think you can use happiness as a bar for like a qualitative evaluation, but you can't quantify it like that. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
Like it speaks to
absolutely.
quality of life, not yeah. But like I think we make the mistake where we try to quantify it by like, how many cars do I have? Do I have a bigger house than the neighbor, the Joneses? Do I have better clothes? That must mean I'm happy. But that
hmm
doesn't make you happy. That's all external crap.
Definitely. And also, it's such a subjective measure, and it's so transient. And like nobody fills out a happiness survey before they go after all those things that they think will make them happy. Like,
Well,
Jeff Bezos, when he was like living in a basement or whatever, working in a cubicle, designing Amazon, never took a happiness survey that said that like my happiness depends on being the richest person in the world. And then now he's there and he's like, of course I'm freaking happy. And it's like,
yeah,
well,
yeah.
actually, if we take a survey, you're more miserable and you have hemorrhoids. So it's like, I'm not sure if life is better.
Yeah. It's funny too though, because I think this is the other side of it. Like society tells us all these things about what a good life looks like, how to have a good life. I remember when we were younger, in my head, just from what everybody else told me, like a good life meant going to college, getting a good job, getting a house, having a good partner, having nice things, and better things than my parents had. That basically meant, and I equated that with, in my head, incorrectly, I equated that with happiness. Like a happy life would be that, right? Because that's what a good life is. And I think we all, as we get older, realize the flaws of what we were told then. And, it changes things because that's not really the case. Aristotle said it very well. He said, you can't make your good life or your happy life contingent on external factors because you have no control over them. And the Stoics say this as well, right? We're like, in order to actually be happy, it has to be things within my control because I can be happy at any time. It doesn't matter what I have.
Hmm. Yeah. Another part of that question is, can happiness be measured or quantified? I think it can, like, I think there are degrees of happiness from like,
Oh, yeah.
just like a peaceful, like a mild happiness to just like an insane, like life transformational happiness event. So I think, I mean, there are degrees, but I also think that like the stronger it is, the stronger the crash is going to be.
I like that. Yeah, yeah. That kind of sounds more like I don't know, joy or something too. Like, like we're like the ups and downs or the peaks and valleys of it. And yeah. Well, actually, let me ask you a question because this one kind of ties into this,
Mm-hmm.
and maybe it'll flesh it out a little. Is it really necessary to pursue happiness?
No. No, I would say absolutely not. I say the pursuit of happiness, even though it's in the Declaration of Independence or whatever that is probably one of the dumbest concepts ever. So, like, I don't know. I listen to all these
You mean
books.
making it a pursuit in general? Like
Yeah,
that it construing it as a pursuit rather?
I think just having happiness as a target is a really bad idea because it's not something that you can hit. It's something that falls upon you every once in a while, but it's not something that you can actually hit. So, like, having a target of being able to do 100 pull-ups, that's a target. Okay. I can work towards that. I can
Measurable.
get there, measurable.
Yeah.
I can plot a whole course to that. Happiness does not have that type of thing. Happiness is something where, like, yeah, there's a whole bunch of stuff that you can do that happiness might grace you while you're doing that. but it's definitely not a viable target.
Well, I think that's one of the biggest mistakes we've made. Was we made it a goal when you should be happy one during your life, not it's not just the goal that you achieve, right? And by construing it as a pursuit, we make it seem like it is something like working out, like hitting a certain target and like working out, or like, a certain target of success, whatever, however you want to measure it. And I think you're right. Like I think it doesn't happen like that. I think it's something that like I always like that too, like the idea that you see a lot in ancient philosophy where like, a good life is about having like a good character because you can handle life events better. You're more balanced. And that's going to mean that probably by and large, you're going to be happier because you're going to live in the moment more. You're going to be less likely to be thrown off course by like great, misfortune or fortune. But like, you're not pursuing happiness per se. You're pursuing like a good character, being a good person. There's a distinction.
And also, another reason why I think that the pursuit of happiness is really effing stupid is because by pursuing happiness, you're saying, I don't have it now.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's the
By
dumbest
definition,
freaking thing
right?
ever. Like, we
Whenever
look
we
at
pursue something, we must lack it. Otherwise, we wouldn't pursue
yeah,
it.
we look at these Western societies that are like literally the most abundant societies since like Babylon. Okay. And they're all interested in the pursuit of happiness. Like you need to have, but if we take a look at happiness where we are on a measure compared with some other civilizations that aren't westernized, well, we're all living by ourselves. We live in a box. We're on a phone all the time. We're freaking miserable. Like just
Yeah.
pretty much miserable. You look at all these non-westernized societies, people are poor. They live with their family, they live in a mud hut. They have to walk 10 miles to go get water they can drink, but they're happy. They smile all day. They laugh all day. They're with friends and family. There's still war going around them. People are getting murdered left and right, but they're happy.
Yeah, it is interesting. It's like I think I've always thought that, even studying philosophy and stuff and religion a lot, like we have such, I think, a messed up perspective on happiness, on how you go about getting it. And I think it's just like why we've told ourselves that it's like, and like with enough money you can buy it or something. And it's like, no, you can't though. It doesn't work that way. Because like you're still you. You bring yourself everywhere. If you're not actually like, if you don't have that mental state, it's like a state of mind. It's not a thing you can acquire. So yeah, you're
Mm-hmm.
good.
All right. My next one would be, is it ever justified to hurt others?
Wow, that's interesting.
Yeah,
Is
is
it
it ever
ever justified to
justified to
hurt
hurt
others?
others?
And we're down into ethics now, huh?
Yeah.
Um, I would say that, well, okay. Um, okay, so if we can get rid of, necessary hurt that's for a benefit, like doctors visits, something like that, we'll just push that aside. Like going to the dentist might hurt, right? But they're also helping you. Fixing a broken leg might hurt, but they're also, yeah. So forget those things. We're talking about just hurting somebody for the sake of hurting. I actually would say no. The only time I would say I do think like self-defense, obviously, like if somebody's attacking you, you have every right to defend yourself. But I think there is even a limit on that. I don't think you should take it to the end. I think just to stop the aggression or to stop the violence. But even then, I would say I don't actually think there is a reason to hurt other people, not to physically hurt them like that or for no reason whatsoever, other than just to hurt them.
Mm. Yeah. So there's it's a very good point, and it gets me thinking about a whole bunch of stuff. Uh, there's a saying, hurt people hurt people. And I think it's said best by Brad Pitt in Bullet Train, where he said, hurt people hurt people.
Yeah, that was actually
But
that's a
it
good
it,
movie.
it kind of makes you thinking, because like I mentioned last week that I had just read Night by Elie Wiesel about the Holocaust. And it makes you wonder about like all the stuff that had to happen to Hitler for him to do what he did. Like clearly something went wrong somewhere.
Yeah.
Someone's not just like born and loved into just murdering a whole bunch of people. Something had to happen. So he was hurting somehow. And right or wrong what he did, uh, it's maybe, this is just a maybe in terms of the thing, but like, is it ever justified to hurt others? Maybe hurting others is necessary to let people know that you're hurting,
That's interesting.
right?
Like, yeah, I mean, up to a point, but like, yeah, I
Like
see what you're
instead
saying.
of
So, like,
instead of like when somebody hurts you, instead of like being like, oh, they shouldn't do this, blah, instead of being like, they must be hurting. How can we help them?
Yeah, I think that's actually a good point because I think, time and time again, we find that people that do things that we think of as being like, out of the ordinary, like violent crimes, hurting people. You look at their past, and a lot of times they have had things that have been bad in the past. They've been hurt as children, they haven't been loved, they've been on whatever, all these things happen. So there's something there to that, I think, for sure. And like, yeah, I think, that kind of suggests too that like, I mean, we all know, for instance, like our whole like our prison system is a joke. It doesn't make anybody better for society. Like that's the goal is supposed to be to like, you know, make somebody ready again to enter society. We don't do that because we just hurt them while they're in there, right? So you just kind of like reinforce that behavior rather than trying to prevent it or rather than trying to change it. So I think that's a good point. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
They would make it look at people differently too. Because when you see somebody do something, instead of thinking like, I can't believe they did that. We should punish them. You might think, well, how can we help them to figure out why they're doing this,
Dude,
instead.
because when I'm hurting, I can be a downright jerk, you
Oh
know?
yeah, I can be a total bitch too.
Hmm. Yeah.
You know? Uh, all right. Here's an interesting one. Does morality come from within ourselves or outside? Actually, the
Oh.
question was, does morality come from within or outside ourselves? I think this is an interesting one. So I guess, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, that's gonna be a both. That's like a nature nurture type of thing, where there is some morality that you have yourself, but there's also a lot that's like imposed on you, social contracts and that type of stuff, where you have no choice. Uh, it's like the whole thing, like holding a door for somebody, uh, giving up your seat for an older person, uh, even so much as just driving on the right side of the road. Like even though these things aren't particularly morality, they're these social laws that we have indoctrinated into us. And there's a lot of like moral type of thing where people in general, people think that they should do good. Well, there's
Yeah.
really not. I mean, you can do bad as good as you want, as much as you want to do good. Like there's really no, you can just it's either or. But I think that part of it comes from. I noticed myself when I was younger, a lot more of it was externally imposed. So like I had
Yeah.
to do what society said was right, or else I would get in trouble. Whereas like as I get older, it's a lot more internally motivated because I notice that I feel better when I act better.
Let me ask you a question, all right?
Hmm.
Because I think the same way, but I think when I was younger, I would say I wasn't really being moral. I was doing things because of punishment, because of the consequences.
Hmm.
Whereas now, so I think when it's outside of ourselves, I don't think we're actually acting morally. I think we're acting because if you think of the counterfactual, if that punishment or that benefit wasn't there, I wouldn't have acted that way, right? So
Hmm.
now when it comes from within, Kierkegaard talks about this very explicitly, right? When it comes from within, when it's something that I identify with, then it's actually a moral action because it's something I'm doing. And I think a lot of ethicists agree with this. Like once you've internalized it, that's when it's really a moral action or a good action.
I can see that, but there's also, you know, so like when we were younger, we acted morally to avoid punishment. Okay. Which is
Which is a
avoiding,
form of learning, right? You're
right,
learning it. Yeah.
right. And avoiding bad things is essentially getting good things. Whereas nowadays we act morally because in essence, we get good things from it. We feel good. What goes around comes around. You reap what you sow. So you reap more good actions. You're going to have more good actions returned to you. Just on the law of averages that'll happen. And so like while it may feel nobler, it's kind of like I think the Dalai Lama or someone said that the most that what is it? The most generous thing, no, generosity is the most selfish thing you can do because it makes you feel good.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
yeah, it's like the same type of thing with living ethically because you're actually making the world better, which benefits you. And even though I would say it's more nobler than avoiding punishment, you're still benefiting from it.
I think what is it? Plato says like, right, it doesn't matter whether you're doing it just to appear that way or because you really are that way, you're still doing the right thing, right?
Hmm.
So from a practical standpoint. See, I mean, I guess I agree with you in that sense. Like it is still for an end. I think I would still argue there's a little bit of a distinction, but maybe not. Maybe because our sense of who we are, what kind of person we want to be, that still feels good. There's still some benefit to that. So reinforcing that and doing it that way. Yeah, it's interesting too, I think, to think about like that.
Hmm.
Next question.
Okay. Which is more important, love or money? Why?
Which is more important, love or money? Love, I think, is more important than money. I
But
would
you
think,
but you can buy love with money.
yeah, right? You can buy anything with money. You can buy love, you can buy friends, you can
Right.
buy influence. No, really though, I think, yeah, I think this is kind of like, I think this is the pro again, I think this is one of the problems with the world we're presented would make us think that money's the only thing that matters. And I think that's totally wrong because I think we tend to neglect so much in our lives that would make our lives of a higher quality because of that thinking, because of aligning success, our value, our worth with literally how much money we have. But I think love for yourself, love other people's love, and love for them, that matters so much more because that means you have a community, you have people that value you, that care about you, you care about yourself, you value yourself. That's way more important than money because you can always get money. You can't get self-worth easily. You can't get, community always easily. So yeah, I think
Hmm.
that's way more important.
Yeah, that's a great one. I always like to look back, like I like to listen to the advice of people who are about to die because I think that they have pretty good perspective that I don't yet have. I'm getting
That's
there.
right there.
The older
So
I get,
like,
yeah, the older I get, the closer I'm getting, but I don't have that perspective yet. And so like,
uh,
from numerous books and stuff where people who are close to death are talking, they're like, when you get to this area, love is all that matters. And then also, like, I've never heard a single one of them say, like, I wish I worked harder. I wish I earned more money. I wish I was richer. Not a single person said that. But they all, like, love is all that there is. And like sometimes they even regret like past loves that they let go. None
yeah.
of them are very few. I don't know. Maybe they probably don't write books about life because they're too concerned about money, but like very few people are like, oh, this business deal that went and blah, whatever. Who cares?
Yeah. Well, actually, it's a good point too, though, because you hear that a lot. Like a lot of people, like especially like when they're younger, like they might like break up with a partner because they get a job that's across the country, but they don't want to miss the opportunity, or like, and like you don't know how that decision is going to affect you later on in life either. Like if it really was the person that was right for you, if it was really an important thing, like maybe that job wasn't worth it. But you believe that it is the most important thing, so that's what happens, right? So
Mhm.
that's a good point. I like that too. Looking at people at the end of life is always a good one because yeah, they're in a very different mind space than we are, so to say.
Mhm.
Um, but what about this? Can anyone ever really understand another's feelings? I'm curious about what you think in this because of interpersonal relationship communication. I'm just curious.
I don't think that another person can ever understand 100%. I think you can come close. I think you can get like 70, 80%, maybe 90% if you're really connected with someone. But to feel it exactly like they feel it, I don't think that's possible. Just because you're not in their body, you know?
Well, yeah, I agree. I think like the existentialists said it well, where like, in order to communicate, we subsume our particular experience under universal concepts, right? When you say I love you to somebody, you use the concept of love. They can't embody you and feel the exact experiences, the exact feelings, the exact impressions, intuitions, whatever that associate with it. So yeah, I agree with you. I think the more we get good at acknowledging, recognizing our own feelings, understanding them in a healthy way, the better our empathy is for getting close to understanding others, even people we might not know well, because we can kind of put ourselves as best as possible in their shoes, but not quite. We'll never fit exactly. So yeah, I agree with
Hmm.
you on that one too.
All right. Next one. What would happen if we lived forever? Aside from the world getting overpopulated.
Yeah, besides that, well, we might not have if we live forever. I mean, population rate might go down super fast, you know? Because look, the Greeks. Okay, here, let me throw this at you. The Greeks, they used to, this idea of pursuing immortality, right? So through act, deed, or procreation, right? Procreating, you kind of part of yourself lives on. If you write like a really great work like Plato, you live on. If you are a great warrior in the Battle of Troy, right? You live on in stories. If you exist forever, that motivation to cement some legacy or something is not going to really probably be there. So I bet you if that happened, I bet you the rate of children would just decrease rapidly.
Ah, interesting. So
You see that already, right? Because as societies get more developed and age, you see people live a lot longer. People can take more time to consider having children. They tend to have less children. I mean, so
Mhm.
why wouldn't that, you know?
I just watched Idiocracy again the other day. Oh
Yeah,
my
it's a
God.
good movie.
That's so great. Yeah. What would happen if we lived forever? Dude, I
Do you
can't
think?
I can
Oh,
only
God.
imagine how boring it would get. Like
Yeah,
I heard Alan Watts talk about this one time. How like basically we all are essentially gods. Because like let's just have a thought experiment. You're God. You can do anything, but you do have anything you want. So, and not only that, you live forever. So all of a sudden, you live every possible life you could ever imagine, and you're still alive, and you still got 24 hours a day or whatever, and
yeah.
you're bored. And so then all of a sudden you're like, well, what would life be like if I wasn't totally powerful? What would life be like if I didn't know the future? What would life be like if I wasn't going to live forever? And it's like, oh, that's where we are right now. So we're basically living the end game of being a god.
Yeah, or we could be beings that like have ascended in consciousness where our consciousness exists forever, and we just run a simulation like this just to get the experience of having meaning in life.
That's a good point too.
I agree with you though. I do think that like having a fixed time limit adds a certain meaning to life that you don't get when it's not there. Because like we've said it a million times, you can do anything, but you can't do everything, right? But when you have infinite time, you can do everything. And at a certain point, like even like for a lot of people, I think like our even our curiosity would start to wane at a certain point. Where like we wouldn't like yeah, developing new skills, doing new things would be awesome, but like at a certain point, like it just get repetitive.
Dude, you've
Like,
eaten everything, you've made all the
yeah,
money you can make, you've scrolled through
yeah,
everything on TikTok or Instagram or whatever.
yeah. The only
Well,
way I could conceivably see like and still I wouldn't even say living forever. Living for a very long time, like is if we had like interstellar space travel and you could check out like brand new worlds, that might cure the boredom a little bit.
mm.
Besides that, though, I can't, and that would require a long lifespan because it takes forever to get to
Dude,
places.
and
So
also we're assuming like some type of permanent youth in this scenario. We're like, what
that too,
happens
yeah,
if you just get progressively older and like more decrepit as time goes on? You would be
yeah.
like, I breathed wrong and I broke all my bones.
Well, yeah, it's interesting because I they were talking about that they were doing studies with mice where they're able to make them like basically roll back the clock, and like I was thinking, I was like, dude, we really want that though? It's like, I mean, that's cool because like you do feel you're healthier, you're more like revitalized, and I mean, it would
Mhm.
be great for certain illnesses, dementia, stuff like that. But like, yeah, I don't know, it's interesting because like it is this problem of like time is so valuable because we don't have infinite time. So it's hard to like, you know, to
That's a good
say
point.
otherwise. Yeah.
Yeah. I would be interested to see where this whole mouse thing pans out in like 20 years. Because you remember when Dolly the sheep came out, when cloning was
Yeah.
the thing, and everybody was like, oh my God, there's going to be clones all over the world. And there's no clones. So, like,
Yeah.
who knows what's going to happen with this time rolling
I'm
back?
curious. We're getting better at solving some of the problems that arose with Dolly, though. And I think
Yeah.
we're getting more skilled at manipulating genes. So we'll see.
Yeah. All right.
Uh,
Well, you want to ask each another question or so, and then
yeah.
we can
Yeah. You
call it.
want to we'll do, yeah. Oh, I like this one. I think this one's a good one. Should terminally ill patients be able to choose death?
Sure. Yeah.
I
I'm,
agree. I don't know
I,
why we don't do this.
I don't know. I'm such like this whole thing for prolonging life for like because life is so bad. I don't think that's right. That's
Dude, you know what? I
yeah.
also hate when they're like when people get terminally ill and they're like, you gotta fight it, you gotta fight it. And it's like, why? You don't have to.
For what?
And like these hospitals charge such outrageous prices for stuff. Like it's just a money-making machine. And it's like, I think it skews people's ability to really evaluate the situation and ask themselves, what do I really want? Is like 6 months of quality life where I might deteriorate slowly with my family and friends better than being 8 months in the hospital? Like thinking these things through and asking ourselves these hard questions and just admitting that
Mhm.
like it's about their life, not about my life when I'm still, here.
Yeah, absolutely. When I was working as a vet, I saw that a lot. Like people who couldn't say goodbye to their animals, so they would just keep them dragging on. Like quality of life was not there for the animals, but they
Yeah.
just couldn't say bye.
And I
And
and
yeah.
I understand that too. It is hard. Like, I mean, there was a great guy at a pet, I think he was a pet psychologist, but he talked about that and he was like, putting them down is important because they don't understand, being dragged along. But he even said, he's like, look, when I look back on it, did I make the decision at the right time? He's like, I probably prolonged it too long, a week or two. It's hard. It is hard. We have a
Hmm.
hard time saying bye, but like recognizing that I think is also important too,
Hmm.
and not just dragging them on. Yeah.
Absolutely. Uh oh, let's see. Here's a good one. Do memories still exist if you forget them?
What?
Do memories
No,
still
no.
exist if you forget them?
Do memories still exist if you forget them? Oh, does like the past exist? I guess.
Well, do memories exist
I don't know.
if you forget
That's
them?
interesting because like, you know, I in the one sense we live in the now and only the now really exists, right? The past and
Hmm.
the future don't exist. But I've also heard it said where like all time is actually converges at some point so that like past, future, and present happen simultaneously. And so like it's hard to
Mm.
say. I don't know. That's a tough one because like I think like if you forget the memory, does it really matter?
Yeah.
Like, isn't it just a moot point? Like, it doesn't make a difference.
Well, so like, okay, here's what I was thinking of. So like, let's say you were trying to remember the name of some book or whatever. Okay, like imagine one of the customers coming to a bookshop. Okay, they're trying to remember the name of a book. Maybe it was a DVD or a CD. They're not exactly sure, but memory's gone. They forgot it. So between when the memory's gone and later that night when it pops back, does it actually
Oh,
exist?
oh, that's interesting. Well, yeah, it must somewhere in your brain. It must exist. You just weren't unable to access it at the time.
Mm.
But then that raises the question of if it can't be accessed, does it exist? Is consciousness only what's accessible at that moment,
Hmm.
or is it also,
Or
what's
maybe, or maybe it was floating through these wormholes in reality in and out of
yeah,
existence, and it just popped back into existence.
yeah. What's like don't they say in the quantum realm like there's this place where like things just uh molecules just pop into existence and pop out. Yeah, maybe something like that, where it's just like poof, gone. Now it's
Mm-hmm.
back.
Yeah,
Yeah, because that is a weird experience. Hmm.
yeah. All right.
Hmm. Do you want
Does
to, we
this
should do
does
one
this
more? Or we good?
podcast even exist if people don't listen to
No, nothing exists, right?
it?
How's
Yeah,
it going? Should we
I think
should,
we can
should we
call
end
it.
there?
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, we'll put the list up for all the questions for you guys in the show notes and in the description. Oh, now I'm blurry because I moved too much. Man, that happens. Anyway, so we'll put the link up so you can access the questions. There's a whole bunch. They're fun. It's always worth doing. Thanks for joining us. If you're watching this on YouTube or listening, please like, share, subscribe, leave a review. That helps us out a lot. We also want to create something for you guys that will help you out this year, but we would like your insight first. Check out the link in show notes or notes, and if you don't mind doing a short survey, it'll only take a few minutes. You'll get the product for free if you do it. So that would be great. We will be back later this week with a quick fix. Until then, that is the Existential Stoic podcast. Later, Andy.
Later, Danny.